What happened when undercover boss Michael Carter walked into his own diner wearing a scruffy flannel shirt and a cap pulled low over his face was something he couldn't have prepared for. The bell over the door chimed like always, but not a single employee looked up. That was perfect. Nobody recognized him, just the way he wanted. 15 years ago, Michael had built Carter's Diner from a near-bankrupt Greasy Spoon into a local favorite with 4 locations across the city. But over the last few years, he'd stepped back, focused more on investors and expansion than the daily grind. Something had been bothering him, though. Reviews still looked great online, but employee turnover had spiked, and profits at this original branch were dropping for no clear reason. He grabbed a stool at the far end of the counter where he could see everything: kitchen, front counter, the waitstaff hustling. Something felt off, even though everything looked fine. That's when he noticed the dishwasher. An old man named Henry moved steadily behind the dish pit. He had white hair, sunken cheeks, and hands that looked like they'd seen decades of work. While everyone else rushed around, he worked with quiet precision. Michael watched him like a hawk, sipping his coffee slowly. The cashier on duty, a young woman with Megan on her name tag, finally came over. "What can I get you?" she asked, barely looking up. "Turkey Club. Coffee," Michael replied, disguising his voice to sound rougher. As she rang up his order, he nodded toward the dishwasher. "That guy, Henry, he been here long?" She rolled her eyes. "Forever. Shoulda retired years ago if you ask me." Michael kept his eyes on Henry. In just 1 hour, he saw the old man take crap from careless coworkers, get splashed by dirty water, and still offer a smile and kind word to customers. Then, near the end of the lunch rush, a young woman with 2 little kids approached the register. She looked panicked as she opened her wallet and realized she didn't have enough. Megan frowned and called another cashier, Troy. They whispered like the woman was a problem they were tired of dealing with. She was embarrassed, her kids fidgeting beside her, and Michael felt tension rise in the room. Henry noticed. He stopped wiping plates, walked slowly over, and handed Megan a few bills from his own pocket. The woman looked relieved, nearly teary, and thanked him over and over as she walked out. "That's the 3rd time this week," Troy muttered loud enough for Michael to hear. "Old fool's gonna go broke saving strays." Megan chuckled. "As if he isn't broke already. Dude sleeps in that junker car of his." Michael's grip tightened around his coffee cup. Hours passed. Henry stayed long after his shift should have ended, scrubbing spots others ignored. Michael saw him do it again, help another customer short on cash, this time a teenager with a declined card. Then again, for an elderly man confused by the prices. When Michael asked a regular about Henry, the man, Ron, gave him the full story. Henry had lost his wife 5 years ago, cancer, wiped him out financially. But he refused help, refused pity, said he'd work as long as he could. Later, when a waitress spilled a full tray, Henry jumped in to mop up without complaint. Troy passed behind him and muttered, "Yeah, accidents happen, especially around useless old men who should be in a nursing home." Michael didn't say a word, but his heart was racing with anger. As the dinner shift arrived, Henry kept working, cleaning grease traps, helping in every corner. He should have clocked out hours ago, but nobody stopped him, not even Patricia, the manager. At one point, Michael saw Troy and Megan whispering in the corner. Their body language gave away more than they realized: nervous glances, smirks, and subtle nods toward Henry. Then came the loud announcement. "We're short again," Troy said at the register. "That's the 3rd time this week." Megan added, 42 this time, same as Tuesday." Henry looked up, confused. Michael watched it unfold, the way the seeds were being planted. The old man who'd spent the day giving quietly was about to be framed for something he didn't do. Michael came in that day looking for numbers. What he found was a man being quietly sacrificed. And that's when he made a promise to himself. He was going to find out exactly what was happening in his diner, even if it broke his heart. Michael didn't sleep much that night. He kept thinking about Henry, about the way he quietly helped others, the look on his face when Troy and Megan started whispering about the register being short, and the cruel words they'd flung without hesitation. By morning, Michael's mind was made up. He was going back. Same disguise, same flannel shirt, same cap, same rough voice. This time, though, he arrived during the afternoon lull when business was slow and people talked more freely. He picked a booth in the corner, ordered some pie and coffee, and opened a newspaper just enough to hide his face while he listened. Henry was there already, wiping down counters, moving slower than the day before. Michael noticed the old man rubbing his wrist when he thought no one was looking. Arthritis, no doubt. It made Michael's gut twist. The guy had no business washing dishes with hands like that. Megan and Troy were also on shift. They stood near the register, heads bent together, whispering. They were being careful, but not careful enough. "So anyway," Troy said in a low voice that still carried just enough, "I checked. Old man Henry's been here 7 years." "No kidding," Megan replied. 7 years? Washing dishes? That's just sad." "Yeah," Troy said with a smirk. "Pathetic, really. He probably lives off cat food to save money." Michael's hand clenched around his coffee cup. "I bet he lives in that rusty Buick he drives," Megan added. "I've seen it parked out back. Guy probably sleeps in the back seat." "No way," Troy said. "My money's on a cardboard box behind the Walmart." They laughed. Quiet, nasty little laughs. But then their conversation took a turn Michael hadn't expected. It wasn't just mocking anymore. "You know, Patricia's starting to notice the registers off more often," Megan said, lowering her voice even more. Michael strained to hear every word. "So here's what I'm thinking," Troy said, checking over his shoulder. "We know Henry's been slipping cash into the till when customers come up short, right?" Megan nodded. "But Patricia doesn't know that. All she sees is the drawer coming up light." "You're saying—" Megan blinked, then her eyes lit up. "We make it worse and make sure she sees Henry near the drawer." "Exactly," Troy said. "We bump the numbers just a little more, then give her a reason to think Henry's the thief." "And once he's out," Megan said, "you bring in your cousin, right?" Troy grinned. "Yeah, and we split the referral bonus." Michael sat frozen, heart pounding. They weren't just mocking Henry. They were going to frame him, drive him out, for a bonus. They clinked their coffee mugs and a toast, like it was all some funny little game. Later that day, Michael watched Henry again. The old man worked with purpose. When a young waitress dropped a plate, it was Henry who helped her clean up. When the coffee machine jammed, Henry stayed to fix it. And just like the day before, when a teenager's card got declined, Henry slid some bills to Megan, thinking no one noticed.
"Why do you let that kid slide?" Troy asked afterward, sneering. Henry shrugged. "His mom lost her job last month. Boy's too proud to take charity, but I know he's hungry." Troy rolled his eyes the moment Henry turned away and made a mocking gesture to Megan. Michael had seen enough for the day, but he wasn't done. He paid his bill and left the diner, but didn't go far. He waited across the street in his car. When Henry finally came out nearly an hour after his shift ended, Michael followed. The old Buick wheezed down the street, not toward a neighborhood or apartment complex, but down a dirt road behind some commercial buildings. Hidden behind trees and trash bins, the car stopped near a trailer that looked like it could fall apart in the next windstorm. Henry got out slowly, shoulders hunched, and climbed 3 rickety steps to the front door. It stuck. He had to shove it open with his shoulder. A single light flickered inside. Michael sat in his car in stunned silence. This was how his employee lived. This man who had given so much. He felt disgusted, not just at Troy and Megan, but at himself. How had he not known? How had he allowed this to happen in a business with his name on the sign? Before he left, Michael talked to a few customers outside the diner, still in disguise. "That dishwasher Henry," he asked an elderly couple, "what's his story?" The woman's face softened. "Lost his wife 5 years ago, cancer. sold everything to pay for treatments, still sends money to the hospital every month. He has family? Michael asked. A daughter in Seattle, the man replied. Wants him to move in with her, but he won't. Says he won't be a burden. Proud man. Michael nodded slowly, then drove off. His heart was heavy, but his mind was clear. Tomorrow, he'd begin building the truth. Carefully, strategically. Because this wasn't just about Henry anymore. This was about the soul of his diner. And Michael Carter wasn't going to let it rot under his nose.
By the time morning rolled around, Michael had already made a dozen phone calls. He wasn't just reacting anymore, he was planning, carefully, quietly. His anger had cooled into something sharper, resolve. He arrived at the diner early, just before opening, and parked in the back where no one would notice. Henry's Buick was already there. Same tired rattle, same slow shuffle as he stepped out and walked toward the rear entrance. Still moving with purpose, still rubbing his back when he thought no one was looking. Michael didn't follow right away. He had another stop to make first, a small coffee shop 2 blocks away, where he'd arranged to meet someone. Ron, the old-timer who told him more about Henry than anyone else. They sat in a quiet corner. Ron looked surprised to see Michael pull off his cap and reveal who he really was. "You're Michael Carter?" he asked, eyebrows lifting. "I am," Michael replied. "I didn't mean to mislead you. I've been coming in undercover to find out what's really happening at the diner." Ron nodded slowly, sipping his coffee. "Then I guess you've seen it." "I have," Michael said. "But I need to understand more. About Henry. About why he stays, about why nobody, including me, realized he's living in a damn trailer." Ron looked down at his cup, turning it in his hands. "Henry came here right after his wife passed, Martha. She was everything to him. They were together 52 years. Michael stayed silent, listening. When she got sick, real sick, they tried everything. Chemo, trials, treatments insurance wouldn't touch. Henry sold everything, their home, their savings, even his truck. Said she deserved every chance, even if it only gave them another month." Ron paused. "It gave them 8. She passed peacefully, but the debt didn't. And Henry, well, he's old school. Said he owed every penny. Wouldn't take charity. Wouldn't tell his daughter how bad it was. He got that dishwashing job and said he'd pay it all off himself." Michael rubbed his jaw, anger simmering beneath the guilt. "And the trailer? Only place he could afford while sending money to the hospital and to his daughter, who thinks he's a manager at the diner. He sends her photos, smiling by the counter, tells her he's doing great. Meanwhile, that trailer park's being sold off. 60 days, and he'll be homeless." Michael felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. After thanking Ron, he drove back to the diner. The breakfast crowd was already forming. He took his usual booth and resumed his role as the silent observer. Megan and Troy were at it again. Their plan was unfolding just like they'd discussed. Megan voided a transaction after a customer paid in cash, and Troy shorted change to a teenager by $2, pocketing the difference. They kept glancing toward Henry like they were timing things. At 11 a.m., a young mother walked in, same woman Henry had helped 2 days ago. This time she had 3 kids in tow. She looked embarrassed, counting her change carefully as she approached the register. Michael watched it happen, already knowing what was coming. "I'm sorry," she whispered to Megan. "I thought I had enough. Can I leave the tip to cover the difference?" Megan's smile was full of venom. "Oh, that's not necessary. I'm sure our dishwasher will cover it again." "Henry!" Heads turned. Henry looked up, confused, from the dish pit. Megan's voice had carried through half the restaurant. The young mom looked mortified. Henry walked over, still drying his hands. "It's all right, Amy," he said gently. "Don't worry about it." He reached into his pocket and handed Megan the money. Michael watched Troy lean over and whisper, "Perfect. That's another $15." They were setting him up, right there, in plain view. Michael quietly stepped outside, pulled out his phone, and made a final call, one he'd been preparing since last night. When he came back inside, Patricia, the manager, was already at the counter, calculator in hand. She looked stressed, frowning at the drawer. "Almost $100 missing this week," she murmured. "This can't keep happening." Troy was ready. "You might want to check the register again. We were short another 20 just now," he said, barely hiding his fake concern. Megan chimed in. "Actually, I saw Henry over by the drawer earlier." "What?" "Right after that lady couldn't pay," Megan added sweetly. "He was at the register, alone." Michael saw it all, the doubt beginning to creep into Patricia's face, the shift in suspicion, just like they'd planned. Henry stood in the kitchen, unaware of the storm about to break over him. Michael didn't say a word, not yet. Tomorrow, the trap would close. And this time, they would be the ones caught in it. The next morning, Michael arrived at Carter's diner with a different kind of weight on his shoulders. The rage from the day before had cooled into calm calculation. Today, everything had to go exactly right. He slipped into his usual booth, same cap, same scruffy clothes, and waited. At 10:15 a.m., right on time, the bell over the front door chimed. A young woman entered, holding the hand of a little girl. Both were dressed plainly, but neat. There was something fragile in the way the woman smiled, in the way she looked around like she wasn't used to being welcome. This was Jessica Miller, a real single mom Michael had reached out to through a local shelter. She wasn't acting, she was struggling. But today, she was also playing a small part in a much bigger plan. Jessica and her daughter Lily took a booth by the counter. Megan, full of her usual fake charm, walked over to take their order. Jessica kept her voice low, just soup for her and a grilled cheese for her daughter. 15 minutes later, Jessica approached the register, holding her wallet tight. "I'm sorry," she said, just loud enough for others to hear. "I thought I had enough cash. My card's still frozen. I'm 15 short." Megan didn't miss a beat. "We can't give food away, ma'am. Maybe count your money before you order next time." Jessica flinched. Her daughter looked up at her, confused and scared. "Maybe I could wash dishes," Jessica offered, her voice trembling. "I don't have anywhere else to go right now." From the dish pit, Henry was already watching, right on cue. He stepped forward, towel still in hand. "I've got it," he said quietly. Jessica protested. "Really, sir, you don't have to." Henry smiled kindly. "We all need help sometimes. Pay it forward when you can." He reached into his wallet, thin as it was, and handed Megan a 20. From the corner of his eye, Michael saw Troy smirk like a man about to collect a prize. Jessica whispered her thanks. Her daughter hugged her leg. And just like that, they walked out, playing their roles to perfection. Not 10 minutes later, Troy walked up to Patricia, who was back at the counter, reviewing numbers. Hey boss," he said, in a voice dripping with concern. "You might want to check register 1 again. We're short another $20. Patricia frowned. "What? That's impossible. I just balanced it." Megan joined in. "Actually, I saw Henry at the drawer again earlier." "You're suggesting Henry's stealing?" Patricia asked, voice strained. "I'm just saying it's weird," Megan said, shrugging. "He's always around the register when the numbers go funny." Michael could feel the tension in the air, like everyone was holding their breath. Megan added, "Do a surprise count, just to be sure." Patricia hesitated, then started counting right there. Michael watched her face as she hit the final number. Confusion, then panic. "We're short, $37. Troy and Megan shared a glance that said, "Perfect." Patricia's face tightened. "I have to take action. This can't continue." She turned toward the dish room where Henry was working, oblivious, loyal, and about to be blindsided. "Henry?" she called.
He looked up, wiping his hands. "Yes, Patricia?"
I need to speak with you, please.
He walked over slowly, already sensing something was wrong.
Megan and Troy stood behind Patricia like vultures. "There's no easy way to say this," Patricia began, "but the register's been coming up short multiple times this week, today included, and you were seen near the drawer again." Henry blinked, confused. "What? No, I was helping that woman. I was putting money in, not taking it out." Megan scoffed. "On a dishwasher's salary? That doesn't even make sense." Troy added, "Maybe he's just getting desperate." Michael's blood boiled, but he held back. One more moment. Patricia looked torn. "I've always trusted you, Henry, but multiple witnesses." Henry didn't argue. His pride wouldn't let him. "I suppose you'll be wanting my resignation," he said softly. Patricia's voice cracked. "I have to let you go. Company policy." Henry's hands trembled slightly. The humiliation hung thick in the air. "I'll go get my things," he said. But before he could move, a voice rang out from across the diner, sharp, steady, and commanding. "That won't be necessary." Everyone turned. Michael stood up, removing his cap, his full height, his real voice. The silence was instant. You could have heard a spoon drop in the kitchen. "Mr. Carter?" Patricia whispered. He walked toward the group, no longer the disguised customer, but the man who built every brick of this place. "There seems to be a misunderstanding," Michael said, "but don't worry. I've seen everything. Every word, every theft, every lie." Troy paled. Megan froze. Michael's eyes narrowed. "And you too are about to learn what happens when you mess with the wrong man and the wrong employee." The entire diner held its breath. Troy looked like he'd swallowed his own tongue. Megan's mouth was open, but no sound came out. Henry just stood there, blinking at Michael like he couldn't quite understand what was happening. "Mr. Carter, I didn't know you were here," Patricia stammered. "That was the point," Michael said, his voice calm but hard as steel. "I've been here 3 days, watching, listening, and what I've seen makes me sick." Troy tried to recover. "Sir, we were just following policy. The register's been short." Michael cut him off with a raised hand. "Stop talking, please, before you embarrass yourself further." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small device. "You mentioned the cameras were broken, Patricia." She nodded hesitantly. "Yes, the regional team said the budget was tight, so—" "Well, I approved a private security audit 3 days ago," Michael said, "including hidden cameras with audio. Every register, every hallway, every shift." Megan took a shaky step back. Michael walked to the television mounted on the wall, connected the device, and hit play. The screen lit up with crystal clear footage. No static, no doubt. There was Troy, blatantly pocketing small bills after shortchanging customers. Megan, voiding transactions after legitimate payments. Then came the smoking gun. The two of them at the counter whispering gleefully about framing Henry. "If we get Henry caught stealing," Troy's voice rang out loud and clear, "Patricia will have no choice but to fire him. Then I bring in my cousin, we split the referral bonus, and no more grandpa guilt trips." Megan's voice followed. And no more Saint Henry stealing the spotlight. Seriously, what's he even doing here? He should be in a home." Gasps erupted from the crowd. Customers stood from their booths. A few muttered curses under their breath. Michael fast-forwarded the footage. There was Henry, quietly slipping his own money into the register after helping a single mom, staying late to mop floors, shielding a waitress from blame, taking on double shifts, doing everything right while those two plotted to ruin him. The footage ended on Henry cleaning the grease trap alone while Troy laughed in the background. Michael turned slowly, his gaze cutting through both of them. That's what really happened this week. Not just once, not twice, over and over. Troy's face had gone bloodless. Megan's mascara was already running. You two framed an elderly man, a widower, a man who gave up everything for his wife, who works through pain most of you couldn't last an hour in. And you tried to destroy him for a bonus check. Michael turned to Patricia. Do you still think this is a misunderstanding? Patricia shook her head, pale and horrified. No, I don't. Good, Michael said, because the police are already on their way. Right on cue, the bell above the door rang again. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside. Michael had shown them the footage that morning. They didn't need to be told what to do.
Megan Foster, Troy Whitman, one of them said calmly. You're both under arrest for theft and attempted fraud. You have the right to remain silent. As the officers read the rest of the Miranda warning, the entire diner watched in stunned silence. Troy tried to argue, but his voice cracked into a pathetic whine. Megan started crying, full-on sobbing, mascara trailing down her cheeks as the cuffs clicked into place. As they were led outside, 2 of the regulars, both older men, stood near the door. They didn't say a word, just crossed their arms and made sure the guilty had to walk through every eye in that diner. When the door closed behind them, Michael turned to Henry. The old man still hadn't said anything. He looked shell-shocked, like it hadn't quite hit him that the nightmare was over. Michael stepped forward. Henry Lawson, he said, I owe you an apology. Not just for the way you were treated, but for allowing it to happen under my name. That ends today. Henry opened his mouth, then closed it again. You don't need to apologize, Mr. Carter, he finally said, voice hoarse. You didn't know. Michael shook his head. That's no excuse. I should have known. I built this place on the idea that employees would be treated like family. Somewhere along the way, I let money and growth get in the way of that. But you never forgot what it was supposed to mean. The room was silent again, but for a very different reason. This time, it was respect. Patricia stepped forward, still stunned. What do we do now? Michael looked around at the staff, the customers, then back to Henry. Now, he said, now we rebuild this place from the inside out, starting with how we treat the people who give it heart. He turned back to Henry. But first, we're going to talk. In my office. The diner burst into applause as Michael placed a hand on Henry's shoulder and guided him toward the back, toward a conversation that would change both of their lives forever. Michael closed the office door behind them and offered Henry a seat, though the old man looked like he might float right through the wall if he didn't sit down soon. His hands were still trembling, and he hadn't said much since the police took Troy and Megan away. Michael sat across from him, quiet for a moment, letting the chaos outside fade into muffled voices. You okay? Michael finally asked. Henry nodded stiffly. I guess I don't know how to be, sir. That was a lot. Michael gave him a half smile. I'm not going to lie, Henry. I don't think I've ever been more ashamed of myself than I was this week. You had no way of knowing. No, Michael said firmly. I had every way of knowing. I just stopped paying attention. That's on me. Henry looked down, then softly said, I'm just glad the truth came out. I never wanted trouble. I just wanted to help people, same way someone once helped me. Michael pulled out a folder from his drawer and slid it across the desk. Then it's time someone helped you for a change. Henry opened it, slowly, carefully. His eyes scanned the contents once, then twice. His hands started shaking again, and not from age this time. I don't understand, he whispered. This says I'm being promoted. Effective immediately, Michael said. You're the new floor manager here. Better hours, full benefits, and a salary that matches the work you've already been doing for years. But I never even.
"You've already proven everything that matters," Michael said. "You've got integrity, compassion, patience, and you've earned the respect of this whole town without ever asking for it. That's what I need running this place. The training can be taught. What you've got, that can't." Henry blinked hard. His throat moved, but he couldn't speak. Michael reached into a second folder and handed it over. "That's not all." "Please," Henry murmured, "I can't take more than I deserve." "Good," Michael said gently, "because this isn't more. This is overdue." Inside the second folder was a property deed, a modest but well-maintained two-bedroom home just a few blocks from the diner. No mortgage, no rent, no conditions. "I spoke to your daughter last night," Michael added quietly. "You what?" "She knows everything now. The trailer, the debts, everything you didn't tell her." Henry swallowed hard. "I never wanted her to worry." Michael nodded. "I get that. But she cried when I told her. Said you taught her love meant showing up when it's hard, not hiding when it hurts. She wants you to move in with her. She says love isn't a burden, it's a privilege." Henry's shoulders shook. For a long time, he didn't say anything. Then he wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and smiled through the tears. "You don't know what this means to me," he said softly. "I think I do," Michael replied, "because it means just as much to me." When they stepped out of the office together, the diner erupted again. Applause, cheers, even a few claps from the kitchen. Patrons stood, staff smiled, a few people whistled. Michael raised his hand to quiet the room. "I've got one more announcement to make," he said. "Starting today, Carter's Diner will operate under a new company-wide policy. Every employee will earn a living wage, receive full benefits, and get access to an emergency assistance fund for hard times. Nobody who works here should ever have to choose between helping someone and surviving." The customers applauded again, some standing, some teary-eyed. Amy, the young mom Henry had helped more than once, stepped forward with her kids and handed Henry a small envelope. "It's a little something we collected," she said, "just to say thank you." Michael raised a hand gently. "Henry's taken care of now," he said, "but I've got a better idea. Let's use that fund to help others, people like Amy, people who fall behind but still show up." He looked over at Henry. "We'll call it the Henry Lawson Fund." The room exploded. Applause, laughter, even the cooks came out to clap Henry on the back. The old man just stood there, stunned, grinning shyly, as the entire diner turned into a celebration in his honor. And for the first time in years, Henry didn't feel like a man barely scraping by. He felt like what he was, the heart of the place. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. Henry moved into his new home. His daughter visited. They made plans. He took on his manager role with the same humble pride he brought to dishwashing. He still stayed late sometimes, but now because he wanted to, not because he had to. Michael, true to his word, became present again, hands-on, committed. He visited every Carter's Diner location and made sure no one else slipped through the cracks. The legacy of what happened in that little diner spread far beyond town. News articles, social media, but to Michael, none of that mattered. What mattered was this, that he'd found the soul of his business again, quietly scrubbing dishes in the back of a kitchen. And this time, he wasn't letting it get buried ever again.